Two cities. After over 15 years spent traveling for my job, I decide to take a break and return to the city for good. While a lot has changed, it is great to be home with my son. Few days of rest, and I decide to accompany him for his daily morning walk and picking up fresh vegetables for the day. Between tall compound walls, he jogs along a narrow path while I take my time walking slowly. The road widens and the buildings move further away, as if making way for the cloudy skies. Over the river, a bridge unlike any I have seen before reveals itself. I descend down the staircase towards the bridge immersed into water. One side slopes down, water from the river flows and collects into a trench. I stretch my hands over the other side, my palms into the cool water. I cup them and let water trickle through, slightly parting my fingers. As I gaze into the subtle ripples in the water, the reflections on either side look so distinct. Where I came from is a monotonous one. All buildings seem to merge into one. So many windows, and I see no people looking out. The other side has me intrigued. Through a large field, 6 tall structures of what seem like water tanks emerge. I walk faster and closer towards the terraced field that reveals itself to be a stepped vegetable farm. Through cabbages, both red and green, I climb the farms. Jets of water from the sprinklers, hidden behind the vegetables, suddenly start to emerge, leaving cool droplets of water on my face. Beyond the swale that divides the fields, in the far distance, buildings line the horizon, reminding me of the city within which these fields have emerged. I walk further to find the locals of the area collecting the vegetables ready for picking in baskets between what seem like the remnants of an old dilapidated structure. I continue to follow a stone path towards a cluster of structures that emerge from this landscape. I am overcome by a fleeting feeling of having been here before. 2 cylindrical concrete structures visible behind. One seems to be intact, while another with broken walls envelops a newer tall structure. As I make my way towards the red staircase of the first cylinder, the fields transform subtly into a pathway of stone and grass. Just as my curiosity about what this place is increases, I spot a group of young children huddled around a uniformed personnel from the city governing body. He seems to be giving them a tour of the place. My son has spotted a friend and is busy chatting, leaving me to join the tour. The guide explains as we ascend the staircase. Earlier, this tank used to be a clariflocculator for when this site was a water treatment plant for the whole of the city. Now it does the same in a way, only now water from the river is collected through the trench in the bridge and brought here in the tank. Through layers of gravel, it is allowed to filter and the overflow runs through the old aqueduct and gets collected in a pond before it runs through irrigation channels in the ground for watering the vegetables. There are 4 such tanks here, but since the treatment plant was shut years ago, a lot of it was left abandoned. Some parts broke, some remained, but they all make this place what it is today. The vegetables grown are also sold here in a market. Let me take you there, he says. The bridge on the clariflocculator ends on the old aqueduct. Part of this elevated channel has broken over time to create 2 separate bridges, one for the flow of water and now another for that of people. I hear a chatter of people from below the fabric roofs suspended from new columns. The descent ends between 2 broken curved walls, suggestive of this being yet another clariflocculator. Through the old walls of crumbling moss-covered concrete, I am met with the sight of the market. Split across 3 levels, a thin water channel divides the spaces. I turn back to spot a small stepped water body, its edges lined with people. Under the fabric roof, shops have organized themselves, Sprinklers on the columns render the air cool and fresh. I maneuver around the market for a bit and followed the guide out of the place. We approach the inside of what used to be the filtration room, now taken over by vegetation, both untamed and new. All of a sudden, memories come flooding back. I am thrown back in time, walking through this space as a child with my father. I vividly remember the story he told me back then of water that stood in the tanks, flowed through the aqueduct, and got treated on filtration beds right where I stood, before it made its way into underground pipes and flowed out of sight. I walk a little further, climbing a broken plinth. Wild plants have found homes within the cracked stone floor. In a distance, I spot a saucer-like structure hovering over the ground, with kids running around on it. The truss bridge and scraper arms stand atop the saucer, revealing that we are approaching yet another clarifloculator. Unlike the previous ones with their walls, this one is only left with its floor, and interestingly, the ground sinks in from one side and turns it into a roof to a whole big space underneath. The steps curve in and out, creating stepped pits for water to flow into. The channels carry the surface runoff from the fields, eventually returning it back into the ground. The guide points to a row of stalls. These flower stalls are set up here temporarily for the mandir nearby. The rest of the day, the space is left open for either more stalls, pop-up markets, or for people to just lounge around. As I near the underbelly of the tank, a large space carved into the earth, I hear the soft sound of trickling water. Between circular columns that hold up the slab and heaps of vibrant marigolds, people are busy making gardens. I follow the guide out of the space as he points to the tall water tower we had passed earlier. This tank is standing on the location of the last clarifloculator, he says. We enter into a dark tunnel of sorts. The high walls on the inside curve and taper outwards as it goes higher, housing a large water tank under which I stand. I catch glimpses of the blue sky through the visual labyrinth. My son rejoins me at the right time as we head towards a door. The circular wall opens up, a winding staircase within. Niches carved out of external surfaces create shaded pockets to sit, meet, read, and work. I climb higher. The staircase leads right inside the tank. I duck down, surrounded by a ring of water, an elliptical skylight bringing light in. I blink my eyes as we emerge out and atop the tank. A pond stands out as a golden body. I spot what seems to be the aqueduct we saw in the very first tank. The guide's voice confirms the same. The overflow gets collected here and becomes this large pond, he says. I see people sitting around and descend down to make my way to this golden water body. We sit at the edge of the pond, feet dipped in lukewarm water. Like in the river and the two distinct reflections, I am reminded again of what seem like two cities. In the backdrop, I spot the bridge over the sliver of the river, the one that will take us back to the city of cars, buildings, and empty windows. But tomorrow, it will bring me back to the small city of tanks, farms, ponds, and people.